At my son's funeral, his wife told me I couldn't sit in the front row, so I stood up and exposed her affair to everyone. Subscribe to see more stories like this. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I watched my son walk through the front door of my Beacon Hill mansion, his expression unreadable. Our weekly dinners had become increasingly strained over the past year, but I maintained the tradition. Stubborn, perhaps, a trait William inherited from me. "Mother, I have news." He wouldn't meet my eyes as he poured himself a scotch, his father's brand. At 45, William had his father's stature but my sharp features. The divorce 5 years ago had hollowed him out, left him wary of connection. "I'm getting married." The crystal glass nearly slipped from my fingers. "Married? To whom?" "Her name is Vanessa Collins. She's a clinical psychologist, Stanford educated." "How long have you known her?" I kept my voice neutral, though alarm bells were already ringing. 6 months. He finally looked up, defiance in his eyes. "The wedding is in March." I've spent 50 years in real estate, evaluating character and detecting falsehoods. It wasn't motherly paranoia speaking when I said, "That seems rushed, William." His shoulders tensed. "Not everyone takes decades to make decisions like you, Mother. I only meant—" "I know exactly what you meant." He set his glass down hard. "You didn't approve of Caroline either, and look how right you were about that disaster." The bitterness in his voice cut deep. Yes, I'd had reservations about his first wife, reservations that proved devastatingly accurate when she emptied their accounts and disappeared with her personal trainer. "I'm not asking for your approval this time," he continued. "I'm informing you as a courtesy." I folded my hands to hide their trembling. "May I at least meet her before the wedding?" "She's eager to meet you too." Something in his tone made my skin crawl. "She says she's heard so much about the great Eleanor Blackwood." The dinner that followed was a mechanical exchange of business updates and Boston gossip. When William left, he barely brushed his lips against my cheek, a gesture emptier than no kiss at all. Alone in my study afterward, I stared at the skyline I'd helped reshape with Blackwood Developments. My late husband had inherited a modest real estate company. Together, we'd built an empire. After his death 15 years ago, I'd continued alone, doubling our holdings, all for William. Everything for William. I opened my laptop and typed "Vanessa Collins, psychologist, Stanford" into the search bar. Something felt wrong about this sudden engagement. My son, still wounded from his divorce, falling for someone so quickly? I'd developed an instinct for danger across decades of high-stakes negotiations. My phone buzzed with a text from William. "Be nice to her, Mother. Vanessa is my future. Don't make me choose." I closed my eyes, feeling the chess pieces shifting on a board I couldn't fully see. Someone was making a move against my family, against everything I'd built. And for the first time in many years, I wasn't sure how to counter it. The March wedding was a spectacle of wealth and influence, exactly what I'd expect from a woman who'd known my son for only 9 months. I sat in the front row, draped in Dior, wearing the practiced smile that had closed billion-dollar deals across 5 decades. Vanessa floated down the aisle like a vision in white, her beauty undeniable. 28 years old, nearly 2 decades younger than William. Her dark hair cascaded over bare shoulders, and her smile never quite reached her eyes. Throughout the reception, I observed, people think that at 73, you become invisible. They're wrong. You become a better watcher. Vanessa circulated among Boston's elite with practiced ease, dropping the right names, laughing at the right moments. But 3 times, I caught her in whispered conversation with a man I didn't recognize. Each time, they separated quickly when others approached. "Who is that man?" I asked Jonathan, my security consultant, disguised as my +1. "Marcus Taylor," he replied, checking his phone. "Attorney specializing in estate law. Bar complaints in 3 states, all mysteriously dropped." I watched Marcus exchange a look with Vanessa across the room, a glance loaded with meaning. "Their connection seems intimate." Jonathan nodded. "I'll look deeper." 2 months later, Vanessa and William moved into my home. To take care of me, they said, though I'd been managing perfectly well. The true agenda became clear within weeks. First came the business meetings where Vanessa would speak for William. "Mother's getting confused lately," she'd tell my executives with a concerned frown. "William thinks it's best if we handle the details." Then came the redecorating. Family photos disappeared, replaced by sterile modern art. My husband's books, William's childhood trophies, all packed away because they collected dust. "Where are my things?" I demanded one evening. finding my study transformed into a stark, minimalist space. "We've stored them safely," Vanessa soothed, her hand on William's arm. "The doctor says reducing clutter helps prevent falls at your age." "What doctor? I haven't seen any doctor." "See what I mean?" Vanessa whispered to William, just loud enough for me to hear. "The memory lapses are getting worse." William looked at me with pity that turned my stomach. "Mother, Dr. Simmons examined you last month. Don't you remember?" The lie was so absurd I almost laughed. Instead, I straightened my spine and met Vanessa's calculating gaze. "I've never met a Dr. Simmons in my life." "This is exactly what he warned us about," Vanessa said, tears welling in her eyes. "The denial stage can be hardest on the family." When I tried to argue, William erupted. "Enough, Mother! Vanessa is trying to help. Why must you fight every change?" Later, alone in my bedroom, the one space they hadn't yet transformed, I made a call to Rebecca, my former assistant who had retired 6 months earlier. "I need information," I said quietly, "and I need someone I can trust." May arrived with Boston in full bloom, but inside the mansion, something poisonous was growing. I began keeping a digital journal, password protected and hidden within accounting files, a skill I'd learned while modernizing our business systems years ago. In it, I documented every inconsistency, every whispered phone call, every strange behavior. The night I heard Vanessa's conversation changed everything. Unable to sleep, I'd shuffled to the kitchen for tea, when voices drifted from William's study. I moved closer, bare feet silent on marble floors. "The treatment is working faster than we expected," Vanessa was saying, her voice low but excited. "He's showing all the signs: confusion, fatigue, memory gaps." A male voice responded through what must have been a speakerphone. "Marcus Taylor." "What about the old woman? Is she suspecting anything?" Vanessa laughed softly. "Eleanor? She's trying, but William doesn't believe a word she says anymore. I've made sure of that." "And the new will?" "He's signing it next week, just as we planned." My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. Treatment? New will? I retreated silently to my room, heart hammering against my ribs. The next morning, I studied my son across the breakfast table. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. When had he begun looking so ill? "Are you feeling all right, William?" I kept my tone casual. Before he could answer, Vanessa appeared, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Just working too hard. Right, darling?" William nodded, but his eyes seemed unfocused. When he stood to leave, he swayed slightly. "Perhaps you should see Dr. Bennett," I suggested, naming the physician who'd cared for our family for decades. "William already has excellent care with Dr. Simmons," Vanessa interjected smoothly. "No need to bother your old friend." That afternoon, I called Rebecca from a burner phone I'd asked my housekeeper Martha to purchase. "I need to meet James Holden," I said when she answered. "The former financial crimes detective?" "Eleanor, what's happening?" "I believe my son is being poisoned." Silence stretched between us before Rebecca responded. "The Westfield Gardens. 2 o'clock tomorrow. I'll arrange everything." James Holden was a compact man with watchful eyes and a reputation for discretion. We met in a secluded corner of the botanical garden where the burbling fountains would mask our conversation. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said, "Rebecca briefed me on your concerns. I understand you believe your daughter-in-law is drugging your son and manipulating his finances." "I know how it sounds," I replied, clutching my handbag. "But William has changed, physically, mentally, and there are calls, meetings with a lawyer named Marcus Taylor." James nodded, taking notes. "Has your son always trusted this woman's judgment over yours?" "Never. That's what's most alarming. William and I built this business together after his father died. Now he doesn't consult me on anything." "And you believe your daughter-in-law is working with this attorney to gain control of your assets?" "I overheard them discussing a new will." James looked up sharply. "That accelerates our timeline. I'll need to move quickly." As we parted, he handed me a small device. "Wear this when you're with them. It looks like a brooch but records audio. We need evidence." I pinned it to my blouse, a cold weight against my chest, lighter than the dread settling in my stomach, but heavy with purpose. July brought stifling heat and the confirmation of my worst fears. James Holden sat across from me in a nondescript hotel room, spreading photographs across the bed. "Vanessa Collins isn't who she claims to be," he said, pointing to surveillance images. "She meets with Marcus Taylor 3 times a week at this motel outside Cambridge. The photos showed Vanessa embracing Marcus in ways no married woman should embrace a business associate. But it was the next set of images that stopped my heart. These were taken 4 and 6 years ago, James continued, placing older photographs beside the recent ones. Different names, different cities, same modus operandi. 2 elderly men, both looking frail and confused, with a younger Vanessa by their side. Death certificates, probate records. Both men died of apparent heart failure within a year of marriage. Both left everything to their new young wife. No charges were ever filed. My hand shook as I arranged the evidence. Have you been able to verify the Stanford credentials? Fabricated. Expertly, but definitely fake. She's never been a licensed psychologist. I gathered the materials into a leather portfolio. I need to show William. Tonight. Back at the mansion, I found my son in his study, looking gaunt. I'd rehearsed what to say, how to present the evidence compassionately but firmly. William, there's something you need to see. He looked up, his eyes yellowed and unfocused. Mother? What is it? I sat beside him, opening the portfolio. It's about Vanessa. She's not who you think she is. As I explained, showing him the photographs and documents, his expression shifted from confusion to anger. These are obviously doctored, he snapped, pushing the portfolio away. You've always been jealous of any woman in my life. William, please, look at the evidence. She's been meeting with this lawyer. My wife is entitled to legal counsel. His voice rose, color flooding his pale cheeks. You've never accepted her. Never given her a chance. She's poisoning you, I said desperately. Look at yourself. You're sick, William. He stood abruptly, swaying slightly. The only toxic presence in my life is you. The study door opened, and Vanessa appeared, concern perfectly arranged on her beautiful face. Is everything all right? I heard shouting. William gestured to the scattered photos. Mother has hired someone to follow you, to fabricate evidence against you. Vanessa's eyes widened, tears immediately welling. She rushed to William, clutching his arm. Why does she hate me so much? Pack your things, Mother, William said coldly. I want you out of this house. This is my house, I reminded him, standing my ground. Built by your father and me, and left to me in his will, William countered. Legally, I can evict you. Vanessa sobbed theatrically into William's shoulder. I looked at my son, my brilliant, strong son, now a puppet dancing on his wife's strings. William, I said softly, something is very wrong. Please, get tested for toxins. For just a moment, doubt flickered in his eyes. Then Vanessa whispered something in his ear, and the moment passed. Goodbye, Mother, he said, turning away. As they left the study, I caught Vanessa's expression over her shoulder, the tears instantly gone, replaced by a cold smile of triumph. August arrived with a suffocating heat wave. Relegated to the east wing of my own home, I maintained communication with my allies through Martha, my housekeeper of 30 years and the only staff member Vanessa hadn't replaced. Dr. Bennett is here to see you. Ma'am, Martha announced one afternoon. Shall I show him in? Richard Bennett had been our family physician since William was a child. Now approaching 70 himself, he still maintained a sharp mind and steady hands. Eleanor, he greeted me, his face grave as Martha closed the door. James Holden briefed me on the situation. Can you examine William? He won't listen to me, but he might agree to see you. Richard shook his head. Vanessa has blocked my calls, but there's something else you should know. He lowered his voice. Before retiring from the FBI, I specialized in toxicology investigations. My breath caught. You believe he's being poisoned too? The symptoms you've described are consistent with several slow-acting toxins. We need a sample. Blood, hair, even fingernail clippings. That won't be easy, I said. I'm barely allowed near him anymore. That evening, I made a rare appearance at dinner, wearing the recording brooch James had given me. William looked worse, thinner, his movements sluggish. Vanessa hovered, cutting his meat, adding something to his wine when he looked away. A toast, I suggested suddenly, lifting my glass. To family. Vanessa smiled thinly, raising her glass. William followed suit. In a movement I'd practiced all afternoon, I stumbled slightly, bumping the table. Oh, how clumsy of me. In the commotion, I switched William's glass with mine. Hours later, lying in bed, I felt the room spinning. My vision blurred, my heart racing irregularly. With trembling fingers, I pressed the emergency button on my phone. A direct line to Dr. Bennett. Poison, I whispered when he answered. In the wine. What followed were fragments of consciousness. Richard's voice giving urgent instructions, the wail of an ambulance, white hospital corridors. When I fully awakened, Richard sat beside my bed, his expression grim. Aconitine, he said. Plant-based toxin that mimics heart failure, nearly impossible to detect in standard tests. The wine glass? Being analyzed. The dose wasn't lethal, thankfully, but we have proof now. I pushed myself upright, despite the protest of my muscles. We need to save William. Eleanor, listen to me. Vanessa knows you've interfered. You're in danger if you return to that house. My son is dying, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I'm not abandoning him. 3 days later, I returned home in a wheelchair, a precaution insisted upon by the hospital, but useful for the image I needed to project. Vanessa greeted me with a solicitous smile that didn't reach her eyes. We were so worried, she said as William looked on, confused. Weren't we, darling? When they said you'd collapsed? Just a silly spell, I replied weakly. Nothing to worry about. That night, I heard them arguing. William's voice raised in rare anger. What were these doing in your drawer? Pills that aren't prescribed to either of us? My heart leapt. Was William finally seeing through the facade? The next morning, I woke to Martha shaking me gently, tears streaming down her face. Ma'am, she whispered, it's Master William. He's gone. The next weeks passed in a blur of grief and calculated moves. William's body was whisked away for an autopsy that Vanessa fought vigorously to prevent. The official cause of death, heart failure. No toxicology tests were ordered, despite Dr. Bennett's insistence. I moved through arrangements like a ghost, watching Vanessa play the devastated widow to perfection. Her black designer dresses, her carefully dabbed tears, her trembling hands clutching sympathy cards, all precisely calibrated for maximum effect. Martha became my eyes and ears in the main house, reporting Vanessa's frenetic activity, meetings with bankers, late-night calls with Marcus, documents being shredded by the boxful. She's moving quickly, James warned during our clandestine meeting in a church garden. Liquidating assets, transferring funds offshore. Once that money leaves the country, it's gone. The funeral is tomorrow, I said. Then the will reading immediately after. Are you prepared for what that will says? James asked gently. I nodded. William changed it. I have no illusions about that. We need more time to build the case. The FBI is interested, but they need concrete evidence of criminal intent. Back at the mansion, I found Vanessa in William's study, my husband's study before that, sorting through papers. Planning your escape? I asked from the doorway. She didn't even flinch. Planning for my future, Eleanor. Something you should have done better. My son is barely cold. Your son, she said, finally looking up, made his choice. He chose me, and now everything he built, everything you built, is mine. You killed him, I said simply. Vanessa smiled, unruffled. Grief makes people say terrible things. Perhaps it's time we discussed moving you to a facility better equipped for someone in your condition. I'm not leaving this house. The decision isn't yours anymore. She held up a document. Medical power of attorney. William signed it last month. I can have you committed for evaluation if I believe you're a danger to yourself. I stepped back, my hand gripping the doorframe for support, not from weakness, but to stop myself from lunging at her. The funeral is at 11, Vanessa continued, returning to her papers. Try to be presentable. And Eleanor, I've arranged the seating. You'll be in the back, with the distant relatives. That night, alone in my room, I removed the backup hard drive I'd kept hidden in a hollowed-out copy of Pride and Prejudice. Every recorded conversation, every photograph James had taken, every medical report, all copied and secured. I opened William's last birthday card to me, running my fingers over his handwriting. To the strongest woman I know, he'd written. You taught me that battles aren't always won by those who shout loudest, but by those who plan furthest ahead. My son had been brilliant before Vanessa clouded his mind. He'd learned strategy from me, patience from his father. I would honor him with both. The morning of the funeral, I dressed carefully in a black Chanel suit that had witnessed 30 years of business triumphs. I pinned my silver hair into a severe bun and added a single strand of pearls, a gift from my late husband. Martha helped me with my shoes, her eyes red from crying. Mrs. Blackwood, she whispered, whatever happens today, I'm with you. I squeezed her hand. Thank you, Martha. After today, everything changes. The weight of the recording device in my pocket felt like a weapon, which, in many ways, it was. The church was filled with Boston's elite, politicians, business associates, socialites, most of whom knew William only superficially. I watched from the vestibule as they greeted Vanessa, murmuring sympathetic platitudes while eyeing her black Valentino dress that hugged her figure inappropriately tight for a widow. I entered last, leaning on a cane, a necessary support after my collapse rather than a prop. Heads turned, conversations paused. I made my way slowly toward the front, where Vanessa stood beside the closed casket. She moved to intercept me, her perfect mask of grief slipping for just a moment. "Eleanor," she said, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet, "I've saved you a seat in the 5th row. I know how emotional you get, and we wouldn't want a scene." The implied message was clear to everyone watching. The senile mother, too unstable to be trusted with proper grieving. "My son," I said, my voice steady. "My only child. And you would deny me a place beside him?" "This front section is for immediate family," she replied, her hand on my arm steering me away from the casket. "I'm sure you understand." I understood perfectly. This public humiliation was calculated, cementing her position as William's true family while relegating me to the periphery. "Of course," I said, allowing myself to be led to a seat far from my son's body. I felt the weight of pitying glances as I sat alone, the matriarch displaced. The service proceeded with practiced solemnity. A minister who had never met William spoke of his generous spirit. Colleagues praised his business acumen. None captured the brilliant, complex man I had raised. Then Vanessa took the podium, dabbing at dry eyes with a black handkerchief. "My beloved husband," she began, her voice breaking perfectly on cue. "My partner, my soulmate, taken from me, from us, far too soon." I watched her performance, noting how her gaze occasionally flicked to the side door where Marcus Taylor stood partially hidden. The connection between them was palpable, at least to me. "William and I had so many plans," she continued. "Dreams we'll never fulfill now, but I promise to honor his legacy, to carry forward the Blackwood name with the dignity and purpose he valued so deeply." Her eyes found mine in the crowd, a flash of triumph behind the veil of sorrow. Some people never understood what William and I shared, the depth of our connection. But those who truly knew him, who supported our love without judgment, you know what we meant to each other. The message was aimed at me like an arrow. She was rewriting history in front of everyone who mattered in Boston, painting herself as the devoted wife and me as the disapproving mother who never accepted their love. After the service, we processed to the cemetery. I stood at the edges of the gathering, watching Vanessa accept the folded flag, her shoulders shaking with well-timed sobs. When the crowd began to disperse, Marcus approached her, their conversation just within my earshot as I lingered by a nearby headstone. "Everything's in place," he murmured. "The reading is at 2. By 3, we can start the transfers." "And the old woman?" Vanessa asked, not bothering to look in my direction. "Once the will is read, she's irrelevant. The power of attorney gives you everything you need to handle her appropriately." Their meaning was clear. Once they had control of the assets, I would become an inconvenience easily dispatched. Another tragic accident, perhaps, or a sudden health crisis. As I turned to leave, Vanessa called out sweetly, "Eleanor, the car is waiting to take us to the law office. It's time to hear William's final wishes." I nodded, gripping my cane tighter. Little did she know I had wishes of my own. The law office of Caldwell and Partners occupied the 32nd floor of a glass tower overlooking Boston Harbor. I sat across from Preston Caldwell, who had managed Blackwood legal affairs for 20 years, his expression carefully neutral as he prepared to read my son's final testament. Vanessa sat beside me, her veil pushed back now, Marcus Taylor conspicuously present as her emotional support. 6 other people completed our grim assembly. 2 Blackwood executives, Rebecca, officially present as my former assistant, Dr. Bennett, James Holden, introduced as my financial advisor, and a court stenographer to record the proceedings. "Before we begin," Preston said, "I must note for the record that this testament supersedes all previous wills and was executed 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, when William was already showing significant symptoms of poisoning." I kept my face impassive. The will's contents were exactly as I'd expected. Vanessa received everything: the house, the business interests, the investment portfolios. I was granted a modest monthly stipend and 90 days to vacate the property. Blackwood Enterprises would transfer entirely to Vanessa's control, with Marcus Taylor named as chief counsel. Vanessa maintained a perfect expression of sorrowful gratitude, while the executives shifted uncomfortably. Even Preston seemed disturbed by the document he was reading. "Is there anything else?" I asked when he finished. Preston hesitated. "There is one additional item. A letter, left in William's personal safe, addressed to you." He handed me a sealed envelope. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "What is that? Why wasn't I informed?" "It was placed there before your marriage," Preston explained. "Mr. Blackwood gave explicit instructions that it was to be delivered to his mother privately upon his death." I tucked the envelope into my handbag without opening it. "Thank you, Preston." "Now," Vanessa said, composure regained, "about the transition of the company assets." "If you'll excuse me," I interrupted, rising with effort. "This has been quite taxing. Dr. Bennett has advised me to rest." Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, Eleanor. James can drive you home. Or rather, to the house. We should discuss your living arrangements soon." I turned to Preston. "I'd like copies of all documents related to my son's estate, please, for my records." "Already prepared," he replied, handing me a thick envelope. "Mrs. Blackwood, may I express my deepest condolences. Your son was an extraordinary man." In the elevator, James waited until we were alone before speaking. That went exactly as expected. "Yes," I said, "they believe they've won." Back in my suite of rooms, soon to be no longer mine, I opened William's letter with trembling hands. "Mother, if you're reading this, then I fear my suspicions were correct, but realized too late. Strange things have been happening. Documents I don't remember signing, medications I don't recall being prescribed, decisions made in my name that I would never approve. I found unusual pills hidden in Vanessa's drawer last week. When I confronted her, she had an explanation, as she always does. But something in her eyes, a coldness I'd never noticed before, made me take precautions. I've collected samples, hair, blood, and the pills themselves, and sent them for independent testing under an assumed name. The results will go to Samuel, who promised to keep them safe. If I'm wrong, burn this letter and never speak of it. If I'm right, know that I'm sorry for not heeding your warnings. You always could see what I couldn't. With love and regret, William." I pressed the letter to my chest, tears finally breaking through the composure I'd maintained all day. My brilliant boy had seen the truth, but too late. Samuel, our gardener for 30 years, who had taught William to plant saplings when he was just a boy. I needed to find him immediately. Samuel Wilson's cottage sat at the edge of the Blackwood estate, partially hidden by the orchard he had tended for decades. I made my way there after dark. Using old servants' paths, I knew Vanessa wouldn't think to monitor. He answered my knock immediately, his weathered face lined with grief. "Mrs. Blackwood, I've been hoping you'd come." Inside his modest home, Samuel retrieved a locked box from beneath a floorboard. "Master William gave me this the day before he died. Said if anything happened to him, I should keep it safe until you came asking." The box contained vials of hair and blood samples, along with a plastic bag holding several white pills. Most importantly, there was a laboratory report confirming what Dr. Bennett had suspected, aconitine, along with several other compounds designed to mimic progressive heart failure. "He knew," I whispered. "Found the pills in her drawer," Samuel confirmed. "Said he was going to confront her again that night, the night William died." The next morning, I called an emergency meeting of what James had started calling my war council. Dr. Bennett, James Holden, Rebecca, and now Samuel. We gathered at Rebecca's apartment, safely away from Vanessa's surveillance. "The FBI is interested," James reported, "especially with the lab results, but they're proceeding cautiously. Vanessa has powerful connections through Marcus, including a federal judge who's blocking the formal investigation." "How long will that last?" I asked. "Hard to say. Weeks, maybe months." "We don't have months," Rebecca interjected. "I've been monitoring the company accounts through my old access codes. They're already liquidating assets. 3 properties sold yesterday at 20% below market value. Fire sales," I said grimly. "They're converting everything to cash as quickly as possible." Dr. Bennett spread several documents on the table. "I've compiled William's medical records from the past year. The progression shows clear evidence of systematic poisoning. weight loss, cognitive decline, cardiac symptoms that appeared suddenly despite his previous good health. "Will it be enough?" Samuel asked. "Not yet," James admitted. "We need more. Specifically, we need Vanessa to incriminate herself." I thought of the recording device I'd worn at the funeral. I may have something. Back at the mansion, I found Vanessa in William's study, now stripped of his personal items and redecorated in her minimalist style. She barely looked up when I entered. "Eleanor, I was just about to call you. We need to discuss your moving arrangements." "That's why I'm here," I said, lowering myself carefully into a chair. "I'd like to request more time." Her perfectly manicured fingers stopped typing. The will was quite clear. 90 days. It's a large house. Surely there's room for both of us. This isn't about space. She finally met my eyes. It's about moving forward, building a new chapter for Blackwood Enterprises without outdated influences. "I built this company," I reminded her, "from nothing, and now it's mine." Her smile was razor sharp. "Perhaps if you'd been more welcoming, things might have been different." "If I leave quietly," I said, leaning forward, "what do I get in return?" Interest flickered in her eyes. "What do you want?" "My personal items, my jewelry, access to my private accounts that William managed." "Reasonable requests," she said, studying me. "I'm surprised. I expected more fight from the great Eleanor Blackwood." I shrugged, affecting defeat. "What's the point? You've won. William chose you in the end." "Yes," she said, satisfaction evident in her tone. "He did." As I turned to leave, she called after me. "Eleanor, I'm hosting a reception next week to announce the William Blackwood Foundation. It would look good if you attended, for appearance's sake." "A foundation?" I paused at the door. "How charitable." "It's the perfect vehicle," she said, attention already returning to her computer. "For all sorts of transfers." I nodded and left, the recording device in my pocket capturing every incriminating word. The reception for the William Blackwood Foundation was scheduled for January 28th, exactly 1 month after William's death, and not coincidentally, the day before I was expected to vacate the mansion. The timing was no accident. It would serve as Vanessa's triumphant debut as the sole controller of the Blackwood fortune and my public dismissal. I spent the intervening weeks in careful preparation, working with my counsel to build an irrefutable case. James coordinated with FBI contacts who had quietly opened an investigation. Dr. Bennett compiled medical evidence proving William had been systematically poisoned. Rebecca tracked the rapid liquidation of Blackwood assets, documenting every suspicious transaction. Martha, still employed as housekeeper, became our inside operative, reporting Vanessa's movements and eavesdropping on conversations with Marcus. Through her, we learned the foundation was merely a shell for transferring assets offshore before Vanessa and Marcus disappeared to start new lives with new identities. 3 days before the reception, I met with Catherine Morgan, a formidable attorney I'd known for 40 years. "The evidence is compelling," she said, reviewing our files, "but timing is critical. If we move too soon, they'll destroy evidence. Too late, and the money vanishes." "The reception is our opportunity," I explained. "Every major business figure in Boston will be there, along with the press. Vanessa can't resist the spotlight." Catherine nodded. "You understand the risk? She's dangerous, Eleanor. She's killed before." "I'm counting on it," I replied. "Her arrogance is our advantage." The night of the reception, I dressed with special care. A black Dior gown that conveyed both mourning and authority, my hair arranged by Martha to soften my appearance. I wanted to look exactly as Vanessa expected, the defeated elderly mother playing her assigned role. Guests filled the grand ballroom of the mansion by 7. I watched from the top of the staircase as Vanessa greeted Boston's elite, resplendent in an inappropriate red gown that whispered of celebration rather than remembrance. Marcus circulated nearby, introducing himself as the Foundation's legal counsel. In one corner, I spotted a cluster of foreign businessmen, the buyers for Blackwood properties, no doubt. At precisely 7:30, I descended the stairs, leaning heavily on my cane. Conversations quieted as people noticed me, their expressions a mixture of pity and discomfort. Vanessa glided over, taking my arm with false solicitude. "Eleanor, I'm so glad you felt well enough to join us. Let me find you a comfortable seat." She led me to a small table in the corner, far from the center of activity. "The presentation will begin soon. I'm announcing several initiatives in William's name." "How thoughtful," I murmured. As she turned to leave, I added, "Vanessa, might I say a few words? About my son?" She hesitated, calculating the optics. Of course, a brief remembrance would be appropriate. The presentation began with a slickly produced video about William's vision for philanthropy, a vision he had never expressed in his life. Vanessa then took the podium, speaking eloquently about plans for educational grants and community development, all funded by the generous endowment from Blackwood Enterprises. "And now," she said, her voice honey-sweet, "William's mother would like to share a few memories." I rose slowly, making my way to the podium with deliberate effort. The room fell silent, all eyes on the frail widow being given her moment. "My son," I began, my voice quavering slightly, "was the light of my life. His father and I built Blackwood Enterprises from nothing, and William carried that legacy forward with integrity and vision." I paused, looking directly at Vanessa. "Which is why what happened to him is so tragic." The room tensed. This wasn't the gentle remembrance they expected. "William didn't die of heart failure," I continued, my voice strengthening. "He was murdered, poisoned slowly, methodically, by the woman claiming to honor him tonight." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's face froze in a rictus of shock. "Eleanor," she said, rushing toward me, "you're confused, overwhelmed by grief." "Am I?" I pressed a button on my phone, and the giant screens behind me, intended for Vanessa's presentation, suddenly displayed photographs. Vanessa and Marcus embracing in hotel rooms, documents showing Vanessa's previous identities and marriages, medical reports detailing the poison found in William's samples. "This is the true legacy being built tonight," I declared. "A foundation of lies, murder, and theft." Chaos erupted. Vanessa lunged for the podium, but before she could reach me, FBI agents emerged from among the guests, led by a grim-faced senior agent. "Vanessa Collins, you're under arrest for the murder of William Blackwood and conspiracy to commit fraud." As they led her away, she screamed accusations of my senility and instability. But the evidence playing across the screens told a different story, one that every influential person in Boston was witnessing firsthand. Marcus attempted to flee, but was caught at the service entrance where James Holden waited with local police. I remained at the podium, straight-backed and clear-eyed, no longer needing my cane as a prop. The frail, defeated woman was gone, replaced by the steel-spined businesswoman who had built an empire. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced to the stunned crowd, "I believe this concludes tonight's presentation." The arrest was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, the case against Vanessa and Marcus expanded as investigators uncovered the full extent of their crimes. Additional charges were filed: fraud, forgery, conspiracy, attempted murder for my poisoning, and investigations reopened into the deaths of Vanessa's previous husbands. I reclaimed my position at Blackwood Enterprises, working with the board to stabilize operations after the damage Vanessa had inflicted. Properties sold under value were contested in court. Offshore transfers were frozen through international cooperation. Through it all, I visited William's grave weekly, keeping him updated on the progress of justice as if he could hear me. "The preliminary hearing is set for March," I told him one crisp February morning, arranging fresh roses against his headstone. "Catherine says the evidence is overwhelming." The media coverage had been intense. Black Widow of Beacon Hill made headlines nationwide. I declined all interview requests, focusing instead on establishing the real William Blackwood Foundation, dedicated to supporting victims of elder abuse and fraud. In late April, I received a call from the district attorney. "Mrs. Blackwood, we need to discuss the case. Vanessa's attorney has approached us about a plea deal." The meeting took place in a conference room overlooking the courthouse. Catherine sat beside me as the prosecutor outlined the offer. "She'll plead guilty to second-degree murder and fraud charges in exchange for revealing the location of assets we haven't yet recovered." "And her sentence?" I asked. 25 years minimum." I considered this. "And Marcus? No deal for him. We have enough to put him away for 40 years. Catherine touched my arm. "It's a solid offer, Eleanor. It spares you a lengthy trial." "I want to see her," I said suddenly. "Before I agree." The prosecutor frowned. "That's unusual, but I can arrange it." 2 days later, I sat across from Vanessa in a prison visitation room. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. In prison orange, she looked smaller, her beauty dulled, but her eyes still calculating. "Eleanor," she said coolly, "come to gloat?" "I came to understand," I replied. Why William? He was a good man, she laughed bitterly. A good man with $1 billion company and a trusting nature. Do the math. There were easier targets. None with your empire. She leaned forward. You want to know the truth? He talked about you constantly. Mother built this. Mother always says. It was pathetic. Taking him was like taking a piece of you. The hatred in her eyes was raw, personal in a way I hadn't anticipated. You didn't just want the money, I realized. You wanted to destroy me. Women like you, she spat, born to privilege, looking down on everyone. I watched my mother clean houses for women like you, work herself to death while they complained about water spots on their crystal. So this was revenge. This was against women you never knew, against a world that decides who matters based on their last name. Her smile turned cruel. How does it feel, Eleanor, to know you couldn't protect your precious son? I stood, straightening my jacket. I've heard enough. Accept the plea deal or don't. Either way, you'll never touch another dollar of Blackwood money. As I turned to leave, she called after me. He cried at the end, you know. Called for his mommy. I paused at the door, then looked back at her with pity, rather than the rage she hoped to provoke. You've already lost everything, Vanessa. You just don't know it yet. Outside, Catherine waited anxiously. Well, tell the DA we accept the deal, I said. But add one condition. She serves her sentence in maximum security, far from Massachusetts. I want her to fade into obscurity, forgotten. That evening, alone in William's study, restored now with his books and photographs, I poured 2 glasses of his favorite scotch, placing one beside his picture. It's done, I told him. Not the ending we would have chosen, but justice nonetheless. The house felt emptier without him, but I'd survived loss before. Tomorrow, the foundation would review its first grant applications. Next week, Blackwood Enterprises would break ground on a new development. Life would continue, shaped by his absence, but driven by his memory. I raised my glass in a silent toast. Some called it revenge. I called it a mother's final duty. July 2025, 6 months after Vanessa's plea deal and sentencing. Summer heat shimmered over Boston as I stood on the steps of the newly opened William Blackwood Center for Elder Justice, cutting the ceremonial ribbon amid applause from community leaders and advocates. This center, I announced to the gathered crowd, will provide legal aid, medical resources, and support services to elderly victims of abuse and exploitation. No one should face such battles alone. The center represented just one facet of William's true legacy. Blackwood Enterprises had recovered from Vanessa's damage. With new leadership I personally vetted. The William Blackwood Foundation had already distributed grants to organizations fighting elder abuse nationwide. After the ceremony, Rebecca, now the foundation's executive director, joined me for lunch on the mansion's terrace. The FBI closed their investigation on Vanessa's previous husbands, she reported. Officially ruled as homicides, though she'll never face trial for those crimes. The families have closure, I said. That matters more than additional charges. Rebecca studied me over her iced tea. You seem at peace. Not peace, I corrected. Purpose. The mansion no longer felt haunted by loss. I'd repurposed spaces, creating a library open to community scholars in the East Wing and converting William's suite into a memorial displaying his achievements and passions. Martha had been promoted to house manager, overseeing a staff that now included several seniors who might otherwise have faced employment discrimination. Samuel continued tending the gardens, now featuring a memorial grove of native trees planted in William's honor. Dr. Bennett had joined the center's advisory board, bringing his expertise in recognizing signs of elder abuse. James Holden provided security consulting for both the foundation and the center. They had become my chosen family, forged in crisis and united in purpose. That evening, as summer twilight lingered, I visited William's grave with fresh hydrangeas, his favorite since childhood. The headstone, elegant black granite, bore not only his name and dates but also the inscription, "Beloved son, visionary leader, his legacy continues." I placed the flowers and sat on the marble bench nearby, speaking to him as I always did. The Morgan case was decided today. That elderly woman whose nephew was stealing her pension, she won, with our center's help. Your name is becoming associated with justice, not scandal. A young woman approached a nearby grave, placing a single rose on the marker. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. After giving her a moment of privacy, I approached carefully. I'm sorry for your loss. She looked up, startled, quickly wiping tears away. Thank you. It's my father. He died last year after marrying someone who wasn't what she seemed. The familiar pattern made my heart ache. Financial exploitation? She nodded, surprised by my perception. How did you know? I've seen it before. I offered her my handkerchief. I'm Eleanor Blackwood. Recognition dawned in her eyes. From the foundation? The case that was in the news? The same. I gestured to William's grave. My son. She studied me with new interest. They said you brought down his killer single-handedly. Not alone, I corrected. I had help. Good people who recognized injustice when they saw it. Her shoulders straightened slightly. The police said there wasn't enough evidence in my father's case, that I should just accept it and move on. I reached into my purse for a business card. Come see me at the center tomorrow. Bring whatever documentation you have. Why would you help me? She asked, confusion mixing with hope. Because your father deserved justice, I said simply, and because you shouldn't have to fight alone. As I walked back to my waiting car, I felt William's presence beside me, not as a ghost, but as a continuation. His death had created this new purpose, this unexpected chapter in my life when I'd thought the story nearly complete. The mansion glowed warmly in the distance, no longer a mausoleum of memories, but a beacon of possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the center's first legal case, foundation grants to evaluate, business decisions to oversee. At 74, when many expected me to fade into comfortable retirement, I had instead become a warrior for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Not the legacy I had planned, but perhaps the one I was meant to build all along. Thank you, William, I whispered to the evening air, for showing me the way forward. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.